15. We are trending still nationally. Just keep pumping that out. We have plenty of really cool prizes and giveaways that are given out for people that are doing that. So make sure you do it. Tag as many photos, anything you might have learned, interesting points, topics. Make sure you put that in there and just have fun with it. Also, one more quick round of applause, everybody, for our DJ John Gosselin. Everybody, he's going to be out drumming. I don't know if you know. This is from the most watched cable television show in history, John Gosselin, everybody. Round of applause, everybody. He's going to be outside as well doing the after party, so make sure you check that out. We'll have food, booze, all kinds of stuff soon. Don't leave early because the bar's not going to open until we're done. So don't pretend like you can't wait 5 seconds. It's going to be all right. I used to live in Atlanta. I know who you people are. Drink. All right, 3 laps. I'll take it. All right, so right now, let's give it up for our final breakout of the day for Microsoft. Please put your hands together for Matt Walleart, everybody. Matt!
So I really did love the DJ. I'm back here dancing. I love to get fired up before the end of the day. I like the way we have a really big room. I really wish you were like, there was someone up there that I couldn't see in the lights. But I know we're all here today, and I know it's the end of the day. I'll try and keep it light. Somewhere up here, there's my clock. All right. So, my name is Matt Walleart. I'm a behavioral scientist at Microsoft, and I want to talk today about M&Ms. So, for psychologists, what we think about when we talk about human behavior is promoting pressures, reasons to do something, inhibiting pressures, reasons not to do something. We view this as how human decisions are made. If the promoting pressures beat out the inhibiting pressures, well, we don't do that. If the inhibiting pressures win, well, that's not something we do. So the reason I want to talk about M&Ms is because as a psychologist, basically your job is just to screw with people for a living. It's kind of awesome. And so I do really terrible things to people, like put M&Ms on their desk. What happens when you put M&Ms on people's desks? They eat a lot of M&Ms. Now, it isn't because M&Ms have gotten any more attractive, right? M&Ms are, why do we eat M&Ms? What are the promoting pressures? Well, they're delicious, right? Everybody knows M&Ms taste good. It's the obvious reason to eat them. There are actually other reasons, though. They're actually beautiful. I submit to you that M&Ms are beautiful, and one of the ways that we know is if I give you just a bowl of green M&Ms, you will eat many fewer M&Ms than if I gave you a bowl of mixed colors. We actually respond to the variety in color in M&Ms, and that's why it was such a big deal when they, there was that sort of like half brown color that kind of looked like peanut butter at one point, and they're like, now we're getting rid of that, and it was a big deal, right? There was a national vote on like what the new color of M&Ms should be, despite the fact that it changes the flavor not at all. It's a big deal. Another reason that we eat M&Ms is actually for calories. Now, this seems like an inhibiting pressure, right? It seems like, well, why don't we eat M&Ms? Because they're caloric and they make us fat, and I get that, My wife is pregnant right now, so I'm putting on sympathy weight. But in reality, that's a promoting pressure as well. How many people have ever been, like, hungry at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Actually, people are probably hungry right now. This is like the perfect session for this, right? Just as we go off to get some food, everybody's a little bit hungry. That's a good reason M&Ms. That's a promoting pressure. Look at Snickers, right? They've taken this traditionally negative thing. Oh, things have calories. Candy has calories. And they said, oh, no. There's this thing, hangry, and you're not the same when you're hungry. Have a Snickers, you'll get better, right? They did a very successful ad campaign capitalizing on that promoting pressure. So there's all these reasons to eat M&Ms. And so when we put them on people's desk, they do. Then we do this slightly different thing, and we put them just across the room on the bookshelf. Now, it seems trivial, right? Very small, 5 steps. But people consume far fewer M&Ms. Why? Because they're just slightly less available than they were before. Inhibiting pressures really rule our behavior. So, why am I talking about inhibiting pressures? I mean, M&Ms are delicious. I could be eating them right now. And I'm not, because they're not available. They're not here on stage. I'm not because they cost something, right? Cost is a great inhibiting pressure. And yet, what we focus on traditionally as marketers is promoting pressures. The problem with promoting pressures is they're really, really expensive, right? We all know that M&Ms, the pinnacle of M&Ms is a peanut butter M&M. And anyone that argues could just stand up and leave now. That is the best they will ever get, right? And yet, they keep introducing these new flavors. Man, we've got coconut and pretzel, everything you can imagine stuffed into an M&M. And every time they do that, it's incredibly expensive, right? There's lab scientists working around, coming up with formulas. They have to spin up production lines just to create new promoting pressures. And yet,
The dominant reason that we are all not eating M&Ms right now is because there is no like sandwich guy at the ballpark right now running around being like, for $1, I would give you a bag of M&Ms. And I guarantee you, as hungry as you are, if there was a ballpark guy right now being like, $1 bags of M&Ms, some people in here would buy them. It is about inhibiting pressures, and we as marketers can start to think more deeply about inhibiting pressures. The traditional example I've been using for this is Uber. I don't necessarily love Uber as a company. I think we can say lots of negative things about their CEO, but they do make a handy example. Uber went into a market where everyone was thinking about promoting pressures, right? Where Uber started was black cars. Like, let's leave taxis and UberX aside for a second, right? They started in black cars. And what was every other black car company doing? They were trying to figure out how to make the black car experience better, more promoting. Well, we'll make it silver, and we'll make it a Mercedes-Benz, and it'll be driven by a comedian who will tell you jokes the whole time, and it'll have a ball and Wi-Fi, and it'll just be amazing. What did Uber do? They said, that's not the problem. The black car is good enough. It gets me from point A to point B. The problem is that they're hard to get. They're expensive. They're not convenient. When I walk out of them, if you've ever been in New York City and you've had a taxi and you've tried to pay for it on a one-way street with 30 cars behind you, jamming on the horn, going, come on, just run your credit card faster. You know how painful it is to take that kind of transport. Those are strong inhibiting pressures. What Uber did was say, we are going to relentlessly and ruthlessly focus on inhibiting pressures. And they did it to great success. If you ever get a marketing email from Uber, you'll notice that the marketing emails, every once in a while they'll do something cute. You get a kitten in the back of your Uber, or your Uber will be a Lamborghini or something. But most of the time, their marketing communication is about one of three things. It got cheaper. Hey, UberX is now cheaper than it was in your area. It got more available. Hey, we can now go to the airport when we couldn't before. Or, hey, we're now allowed into this state that we weren't in, or this city that we weren't in before. Or that it got more available. Hey, we have now added 300 new Uber drivers in your area. You'll always be able to get one. You'll have less rush pricing. Those are their communications. Literally look at their email campaigns. They're relentlessly focused on inhibiting pressures. So, if you can't tell, I'm a little obsessed with inhibiting pressures. Another reason that I'm obsessed with inhibiting pressures is because they tend to be homogeneous. So here's what I mean by that. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of reasons that people take an Uber from point A to point B. It might be that they're going to work. It might be that they're picking up their kid. They're going to the airport. Like, I could just endless, they're going out at the beginning of the night, at the end of the night. Just endless lists of reasons that people take Ubers, right? The things that keep people from taking Ubers are incredibly predictable, and they are the same for everyone. Availability, price, is there surge pricing? Can they even get one quickly? Do they have the app? Right? There's a handful of things that are true for absolutely everyone. Is it available in their area? And that means, dollar for dollar, when we spend $1 on inhibiting pressure, on reducing these inhibiting pressures, we actually get much greater return than when we spend $1 on promoting pressures. Because everyone has different promoting pressures. Now, I'm not saying that we should ignore promoting pressures. I'm not saying that we shouldn't market to people and market to their needs. What I'm suggesting is that we as marketers often ignore inhibiting pressures. And yet that is some place that we can focus, and it's one of the places that we can partner best with the people at our company. There's been a lot of talks today about working with UX, working with engineering, working with these other things. The reason is that those are the people who have control over inhibiting pressures much of the time. So, how are we doing so far? I'm going to look at the people in the front row because you're the only people I can see in the lights. Nodding, yes, this works. Okay. So, now that we have sort of the basic promoting inhibiting pressure framework, I want to talk about a couple of other things sort of related to the framework. One is suggesting to you that the framework can actually tell you natural partnerships that you should make and natural competitors that you didn't expect. I want to put out there, for example, the somewhat controversial idea that Netflix and Uber are competitors. Why? So, what is Netflix's mission on a Friday night? What are they trying to get you to do? Stay home. Stay home on the couch with your loved ones watching something on Netflix, right? What is Uber's mission on a Friday night? Go out. Please go out and get so drunk that you can't drive, please, so that you'll take an Uber. And then you'll take an Uber back to your car. And then you'll take another Uber. Just keep taking Ubers everywhere you go. Leave your house as much as possible. That also suggests natural partnerships for Uber. It blows my mind that Uber and Zipcar have not partnered. It blows my mind. Why? Because let's talk about behavioral statements for a second. When I think about promoting and inhibiting pressures, in order to sort of go through this correctly, you want to know what the world looks like when you win, right? Uber knows what the world looks like when they win. which is for people that live in an urban area, right? They've defined their population. I grew up country. They don't give a shit about us out in the country. They're about urban areas. If you live in an urban area and you want to go from point A to point B, right? What do they presuppose? They presuppose you want to go from point A to point B. They're not convincing you to do it. They just presuppose you want to do it. So given you live in this area, given that you want to do this, you will take an Uber. That is an absolute statement that they drive for, right? They don't say, well, sometimes you'll take an Uber. You say, you will take an Uber. That's your thing. And the reason that they do that is that it tells them who their competitors are, like buses, right? Walking, bike lanes. These are all Uber competitors because Uber wants you every single time you want to go from point A to point B, Uber. It also, however, suggests natural partnerships. So when you said for people in urban areas, when you want to go from point A to point B, it's not quite accurate. What they're really saying is if you live in an urban area and you want to go from point A to point B within this urban area, take an Uber, which means they have a natural partnership with somebody like Zipcar because they have a common enemy. What do both of them want to not have happened? Car ownership. Both Uber and Zipcar are deeply invested in you not having a car. And so if you take that as a uniting statement between the two of them, then that suggests that, hey, Uber says, all right, within the city, Ubers, outside of the city, Zipcars. Want to take a bike, go camping, bring your dog, get stuff that won't fit in an Uber? Zipcar. Because that's completing. That is a complete package against their common enemy, which is owning a car. Is this making sense? Okay, still good. And I promise, by the way, at the end I will actually take questions. A lot of people here don't, but I prefer to. So, what does this mean for you as a marketer? I think you actually want to get in a room, and I think you want to write out a behavioral statement. And I think this behavioral statement is incredibly important because I think that one of the problems that we have as marketers is that we sort of focus in on the micro goal. I want to get more people to the site. And that's admittedly a very good goal, but it's levering up to something. You have a master level goal for your company that is driving some sort of behavior that you can observe in the world. And by the way, you can measure it too. Right? Data is incredibly important. One of the things about behavioral statements is they allow you to immediately put metrics next to them so you can track how you're doing all the way up the chain. So it starts at something as you as a company are doing. Again, let's use our Uber example. Uber can measure in the areas that we're in, are people taking Uber more or less often? And that's their macro goal for the company. It's not about app downloads. It's not about how many Ubers an individual person takes. It is all about this macro number that is, as a company, did we make this number go up? Then you can keep going down and down the ladder. I want to use another example, which is smoking. I know it's a controversial one in the South. Smoking is the single greatest public health intervention that we have managed to accomplish in the United States, anti-smoking. Right? You go from a period in the 50s and 60s where basically every adult American smokes. Everybody. And now almost no one smokes, comparatively. And we did that in 50 years. Right? We went from something that people were doing literally 10 or 20 times a day to completely extinguishing that behavior. So how did we do it? Well, the very first thing that we did was a strong inhibiting pressure. Does anybody know what that was? Taxes, right? It was taxes. We just made it incredibly expensive. It turns out cost is a really good inhibiting pressure. We also did something else that in the 80s that many people gloss over, which is we banned smoking advertising. We removed a promoting pressure. Not only did we put in place a very strong inhibiting pressure, but we removed promoting pressures. We said, you can't advertise on TV, you can't advertise in movies, you can't advertise in magazines, you can't use cartoon characters, right? Joe Camel, gone. You're not legally outlawed cartoon characters, right? That's an amazing law. Then we started going to competing pressures, right? So we said, all right, we've made the inhibiting pressures as strong as we can. We've weakened all the promoting pressures, the make it look cool. So what are the things that they can do instead of smoking? Well, how about nicotine gum? What are we going to do? We're going to make it cheaper. We're going to subsidize it. We'll remove an inhibiting pressure. And we will subsidize their advertising. We will allow them to advertise on television. We will allow them into markets where we don't allow smoking so that you can have strong promoting pressures. And you could see these examples over and over and over again. And they're incredibly effective when you start to consider not only your behavior, but also the competing behaviors, the things that people could be doing instead. When you look at your competitors, right, people in here do competitive marketing. You want to do competitive analysis. You want to look at the other behaviors that people are doing instead of your behavior. Just as we suggest that sort of Netflix and Uber are natural enemies, we can actually market that way, right? We can go specifically after making a microsegment targeting Netflix users on Facebook, right? People that liked Netflix, hey, those are a great audience to see if you can get them to get out there and use Uber. And again, you can do this for partnership, right? Another natural partnership, Uber and Thrillist. Why? Thrillist wants you to go out, Uber wants you to go out. They don't compete with each other, they have a common goal. That's a great opportunity for a partnership. You want to get product people involved in that. You want to get UX people involved with that. And you want to start with a macro behavioral statement and then lever down. I know many of you, you're not the CEOs of your company, right? You can't just willy-nilly make all the decisions that you want. But there is a fiefdom within which you can make a decision. And you need to know how there's a clear ladder between the decisions that you make and are responsible for up to the top. So I said earlier, well, it doesn't matter how many people visit your website. Well, it does matter how many people visit your website to the extent that it contributes to the upper level goal. Right? If the upper level goal is, hey, a bunch of people take Ubers, we know app downloaders matter, right? We know that one of the inhibiting pressures is you can't really get an Uber very well if you don't have the app on your phone, right? But you have to know, how did this inhibiting pressure ladder up to that macro goal that we have? So get in a room, write out your macro goal, write your promoting and inhibiting pressures, and then start drilling into them. You're not going to be able to address every one. You can actually get together with your team and you could say, hey, you know, there's price and there's availability and there's, you know, sort of top of mindness. And we're really going to, you know, we can't do that much about price. We don't have control on that within our company. So we know it's there. We're going to set it aside, right? Then we're going to say, okay, the one we're going to focus on is getting apps on the phone, right? So then, given that you have a phone on a platform that we support, you will have the Uber app. It's a perfect behavioral statement. Great. What are the promoting pressures? What are the inhibiting pressures for that individual behavior? And you can keep doing this and doing this and doing this until you get to a chunkable size where you can give somebody freedom. So if you're a manager in this room and you're thinking, all right, I have all these like 20-year-olds on my team and they're like, hey, I really want control. I want to be able to own something. Great. This is a way for them to own something, right? Go far enough down the ladder and say, whatever this micro goal is, you're responsible for the promoting and inhibiting pressures around it, and you can go affect those. And then you can say, here's a metric, and you can see how that metric ladders up to all these things. Hey, you moved your thing, and it moved this thing above it, and it moved this thing above it, and up here, hey, it moved the number of Uber rides that people took. That's why metrics are so important. Not just because they give us new areas to look at, not just because they help us move business metrics or convince CEOs of things, but because they can tell us, hey, how does my little tiny domain down here relate to the others? We're very bad at that sometimes. That's one of the reasons I like to lever people through these behavioral statements, because we're very bad at that. We say, hey, I'm in charge of app downloads, and I'm only going to look at my app downloads metric. If you don't know how your app downloads metric changes the overall metric of usage, then you're not doing your job. Because you can drive hundreds and thousands of app downloads, and if it doesn't move this top line at all, what you did was useless. And you are individually responsible for knowing whether that is true, whether it moved. How are we doing in the front? Yes, still nodding vaguely. I will take a break right now and ask if there are any questions. And forgive me, I can only sort of see. None. Well, yes, ma'am. Well, so let me reframe that a little bit. So the question was sort of, hey, you know, Uber went and competed with taxis, which was sort of their secondary market after they finished black cars. They went after taxis, and they said, well, taxis had all these rules, and Uber just chose to ignore them. Let me say sort of. What I think Uber did a really interesting job of was not buying into the status quo of inhibiting pressures. This is something that people do a lot. So the first startup I built and sold was a company called Thrive. It was a competitor to Mint. We sold to LendingTree. And one of the things that you see over and over in finance that stifles innovation, that really holds marketers back, is they say, these are the rules. This is the state of the industry, and I can't do anything about it, and so I have to act within those. No. What Uber did and other companies have done successfully since then is say, and I'll come back to you in a second, is say, I am actually going to try and fundamentally change the rules that govern my industry. right? And you can do that. And I think if there's anything startups have shown, it's that you can do this successfully. Now, do I think flagrantly ignoring the rules the way that Uber did was the best way to go about it? Absolutely not. Right? I think you want to work with authorities in other places, and I think we could look at examples where people have done this in different ways. Airbnb was slightly more respectful of sort of laws, worked more closely with lawmakers. Uber's now doing that, right? They're sort of backtracking and working on these things. So I'm not suggesting Uber was the way to do this, and as I already said, I'm not a big fan of their CEO. But I do think that, you know, when you look at these really disruptive, interesting companies, what they've done is say, hey, you know what? There's this whole other thing that isn't a hotel. Right? I'm not starting with the assumption that the hotel is the only way of doing this. I'm not starting with the assumption that the taxi is the only way of doing this. Right? One of the things that can get really interesting when you draw you're promoting and inhibiting pressures is it can tell you, hey, here are the inhibiting pressures I actually have to change, the rules and laws that I have to change in order to do the kind of things that I think will benefit my users. And it's that key point that's last. I mean, I think we as marketers have to be responsible for benefiting our users. Let me give you perhaps a different example, and maybe this will help. So I believe very strongly in gender pay equity. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that women in the United States are underpaid by 20%. Just boggles my mind. Just blows my mind. I hope some men in the audience are clapping too. Like, this is this should, all of the people, look, there were other sessions that were like, don't suck at digital marketing. You all came here with your geeks. If you are a geek, the math here is fundamentally broken. You all like to play board games, you all like to play sports. You would never play a board game or a sport in which like the rules were, hey, when you go around Go, you get $300, and when you go around Do, you get $100. Good luck winning. So, we got really obsessed with this. And so we started saying, all right, well, what are the promoting and inhibiting pressures that are going on around a very particular behavior, which is that women in general do not ask for raises nearly as often as men. Why is this? What causes people to ask for raises in the first place, and what prevents them from doing so? And in doing that, we challenged a lot of the status quo around what had to be, right? So if you went to sort of the gender equity wage movement, they said, well, that's just with the way the women are. And so what we need to do is we need to encourage them to go ask. Like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go encourage them to go ask, which I think is a noble goal. I mean, I think it is important that we raise the awareness about the pay gap, but it's not like women, like the promoting pressure for asking for a raise is money. And it's not like the women in this room don't want money, right? The problem is not the promoting pressure, it's the inhibiting pressures. So what did we do? We went and built a product called GetRaised.com. It's completely free. And basically what we said is, what are all of the things that prevent women from asking? Not what are all the reasons they ask, but what are the reasons that prevent them from asking? We just started challenging status quos. We made it so that they can tell us what they do, and we'll tell them if they're underpaid. That's an amazing idea. Why don't you just tell them? Hey, you know what? Like, it turns out, according to the government, like, here's the average in your area, here's where you are, you can see it for yourself. We knew that asking was really hard for them, right? We socialize women to ask questions in an emotionally sensitive way. So men walk into a raise and they say, I did A and B and C, and I want a raise because of it. And women walk in and they say, my son's going to college, so I want a raise. Which is actually a totally valid like want and desire in the world, but it's nothing to do with business goals. And we socialized women into saying that. So how can we translate for them? Well, great, we'll just make a little thing. How many people have done a Mad Lib? Yeah, geeks, Mad Libs. So all we did was make a Mad Lib. We said, all right, tell us about your accomplishments. Just fill in this box. What to do? Generate a letter. 70% of the women that hand in that letter get a raise. The average raise is $6,500 from handing in a letter. The average time from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, generating the letter, is about 5 minutes. So $6,500 a year for the rest of your life for 5 minutes. And we did that by systematically challenging the status quo. Systematically saying, hey, all of the rules, like, for example, one of the rules is you don't talk about how much you make. We're going to blow that off the table. We're going to make it really, really easy to do wage transparency. So I think that there are examples that, you know, Uber hasn't done it in a very pro-social way, but I think there are examples of how you can get pro-social. I think smoking is another great example, right? We have this sort of implicit assumption, hey, you can't really ban forms of advertising, right? Like, that's just, you know, that's free market. You shouldn't touch that. Hey, you know what? We did. And it saved a lot of people's lives. So I don't think it has to be the Uber example. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Or sir, I can't really see. Yes, person raising their hand.
It's long been used, convenience has long been a spectrum which has been used in advertising. So when you say Uber need to focus on inhibiting pressure, which is used with credit card example, well, that's simply convenience. So how are you differentiating benefit as opposed to inhibiting pressure.
Sort of. Sort of. Wait. I think I got you. I think what you're saying is convenience sounds like a promoting pressure. Okay, but it isn't. So here's what I mean. So I think we want to be sort of ruthless about what, by the way, thanks for raising the lights, I appreciate that. Sort of ruthless about what is a promoting and inhibiting pressure. Now, just because you sell it as a benefit doesn't mean it isn't an inhibiting pressure. It is the removal. Convenience is the advertisement of the removal of an inhibiting pressure, right? This thing that was hard, we will now make easy. LendingTree made a lot of money off this, right? LendingTree said, hey, we're going to take mortgages, which are really, 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 really hard, and we're going to make them really, 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 really easy, and that's going to be a feature of our marketing. But it's not a reason to get a mortgage. Convenience is not a reason to get a mortgage. If you didn't have you have to want to buy a house to get a mortgage, and then convenience comes into play. And one of the things that I'll say is, we get really, really lazy here. We say it's easy enough, right? We who are familiar with the product and know it end to end, we're like, oh yeah, it's easy enough. Engineers love to do this. They're like, what? It's only 22 form fields long? I get it done. I was talking to somebody from Amazon Web Services the other day, and I was asking him how to do something, and he said, oh, I have a checklist for you. It's 17 easy steps. I was like, 17 easy steps? He said, yeah, it used to be 15, but then we made it easier. Thanks, guys. And maybe they are easy steps, but have you ever had that moment that has taken your breath away where you literally forgot to breathe? Can you think of anything more automatic that you don't think about in your mind than breathing? And yet, you can become so cognitively busy that you can forget to breathe. There is no such thing as easy enough. This is the, wow, if I move it closer to my mouth, I get louder. This is the number of apps available on the App Store, right? Any app store, pick Apple, Google, Microsoft, whatever. Any app store, basically up and to the right. This, completely flat line, is the number of apps that are installed on any given user's phone at any given time. We've basically reached cognitive confusion. We can only sort of pay attention to so many things in the world, and so every time I install an app, I more or less uninstall another app that I don't use as much, or it sits there and I don't use it. Another way of saying this is that people, more or less, have a very fixed pie of cognitive resources. They can only be as smart as they are. They can only pay attention to as many things as they are. Parents know this implicitly, right? Something comes onto your plate, something falls off your plate, right? This is incredibly hard. So, promoting pressures are all about warring for that pie, right? They necessarily say, hey, I have to get you to want to do this thing, which means you're going to have to put it in place with all the other things that you want to do at this time, and hopefully I'll win some mind share from you. The great thing about inhibiting pressures is it's not a war for that pie. It just says, hey, in order to use my service, you have to pay, I need even less. You used to have to pay 2% of your attention on bills, now you have to pay 1% of attention on bills. Right? Automaticity is the greatest marketing opportunity we've ever had. And we know it as marketers, right? If you want to reflect on human behavior, always reflect on yourself. Think about your own work processes. What determines whether you use a tool? What determines whether you advertise on an ad network or go through another marketing tactic? How easy it is. You're like, oh, I already made this coupon code and now I can reuse it 300 million times. Perfect, I'm going to do that. And if a system makes something where I can hit one button and that happens, great. Can you apply that same level of automaticity to a person, right? What of these form fields can you autofill? I'll give you another example from GetRaise that I love. It goes against everything marketers will tell you. It's an incredibly long number of screens. I've bored one guy, he's leaving. There you go. He's learned his lesson. So people are very, very good at answering just a single question on a page. One or two questions, very, very easy. Then we do something kind of interesting at the bottom of the page, which is we fill in a sentence based on what you just told us. So let's say, for example, the piece of information that I'm trying to get from you is, how long have you been a digital marketer? So I say to you, when did you start as a digital marketer? And you say, June 1990. And at the bottom of the screen, I just fill out little sentences that says, I've been a digital marketer for 7 years. Why do we do that? Because it turns out the human brain is very, very attuned to detecting errors when they are phrased as true sentences, right? It's very, very hard to remember the month in which I started at Microsoft. But if the thing at the bottom said, you've been at Microsoft for 20 years, I'd be like, nope, I clearly filled out something wrong, right? Error checking. Even error checking, you can hack on the inhibiting pressures. How are we doing so far? According to this thing, I have 6 minutes left. That probably means I have time for like one more question, given the way I ramble. And no one wants to ask one. I'll keep rambling. Do you want me to continue on this topic by show of applause, continue on this topic, versus give you 6 minutes of something different? Continue on this topic? 6 minutes of something different. 6 minutes of something different. All right, awesome. So I want to talk about identity. So one of the most interesting promoting pressures to me is identity. We move in about 10-year cycles in social psychology, my field. And so, when I started in the field, the sort of 10-year cycle was about stereotyping and how we perceive other people. In the last 10 years, we've been relatively obsessed with how people make decisions, something called JDM, judgment decision making, which is my particular field. The next 10 years, I think, is this. It is trying to resolve the fundamental conflict between two things that I know to be true. One of the things that I know to be true is that if you don't feel like you are part of the group, you will get depressed. If you don't feel like you're part of something, you get depressed. You have to feel like you're part of the human race, part of a community. Simultaneously, if you don't feel like a special snowflake, you will also get depressed. This is profoundly difficult. How do you make people feel like they are part of something big, and yet also like they are special and unique and individual? And I think this is something we as marketers have to think very deeply about. In particular, I think we have to think very deeply about it because there's really, at any given time, there's two sort of axes to this. One is the temporal bit. People's personality and what they like and dislike changes. Or remains constant. So that's one dimension. Change versus constancy. Another dimension is liking versus disliking. So I'm going to give you my favorite example, Johnny Cash. I like Johnny Cash. I am what is called a stable liker of Johnny Cash. I liked Johnny Cash when he wasn't popular. Then they put out a documentary or a sort of biopic, and with Joaquin Phoenix, and he did an amazing job. And hey, and then everybody loved Johnny Cash. And now it's been a few years since that biopic, and they put out one about Ray Charles and everybody else, and now people care about other things, right? And Johnny Cash has sort of faded off into obscurity again. Guess what? Still like him. I am a stable liker. Now, there are unstable likers. Unstable likers have never heard of Johnny Cash. Then they see a biopic about Johnny Cash and they go, those are some really cool boots, sir. I will like you, and I will like you for about as long as everybody else likes you. And then, poop, I'm gone. Then, there are unstable dislikers. We all know these people. Unstable dislikers, they kind of didn't care about Johnny Cash, or maybe even they kind of liked him, and then the biopic came out and everybody loved him, and they were like, fuck Johnny Cash. Y'all a bunch of posers. Liking Johnny Cash, he ain't nothing. It's all about Townes Van Zandt, right? And then there are people who are stable dislikers. I have stable dislikers of Johnny Cash. They hated Johnny Cash at the beginning, before the biopic came out. They hated him during the biopic, and they will continue to hate him. They just don't like his music. So, why am I mentioning these four things in relation to sort of this idea of groupness versus individuality? Those people who stably liked Johnny Cash are making a special snowflake, or dislike Johnny Cash, are making a special snowflake argument. They are saying, regardless of my need to belong to the group, I like Johnny Cash. He's part of my unique, special, individual, holistic identity. The unstable people, the people who are moving up and down, those are people who are appealing to their group identity. They're saying, my liking of Johnny Cash has something to do with how I feel like I fit in the world. Whether I feel like I fit in the world by hugging on to what everybody else likes, or whether I feel like I push it away, but it's still about belonging to this groupness. So why do I think this is interesting as, man, guys, it's like, I have 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Why do I think this is so incredibly interesting for us as marketers? Because I think we spend an inordinate amount of time looking at our own users. And I think that's awesome. I'm very into user research. Obviously, I'm a psychologist. I like talking to people. I think this is very important. But what I want to suggest to you is that what we as marketers should also be doing is talking to our non-users. How often do you actually sit down with people who have actively rejected your product and say, let's talk about this? And I'm not judging you. I just want to know. Talk to me about your needs and wants and desires. It's those non-users that are so important, right? Someone earlier today said, well, take people in the middle of your funnel and then look at people at the end of your funnel and try and make people in the middle of your funnel look like people at the end of your funnel. Well, maybe, but maybe these people are actually different. Maybe they actually look really different and are different people and are honoring different things. Their individual identity, their group identity. Maybe they don't want the same things as people who made it through. Maybe we should go talk to them. Go talk to your non-users. Actively look at how you would destroy your business, right? I'm going to tie this all back together in the last minute. It's going to be amazing, right? I talked about behavioral statements up here, right? I talked about, if people live in an urban area and they want to go from point A to point B, they will take an Uber. I want you to consider what the opposing statement would look like. Why they would not take an Uber. So here's one of the most interesting findings from doing this behavioral research. So when we tell people, get people to do something more, smart people get in a room and they talk about promoting pressures. Why? Because we think about rewards. You want to get people in the mood, do something more, reward them. And if I say, hey, I want you to get people to do something less, what's the first thing they think about? Smoking and taxes and punishment. It's all about inhibiting pressures. So if I tell you, hey, get people to move to think about your product more, to use your product more, you will sit in the room and you will come up with promoting pressures. So I want you to think about, hey, how can I make people use my product less? Actually brainstorm that. Actually brainstorm how you would destroy your own business. Form a game plan on how you would beat yourself, and then shore up against that. That will generate unique and interesting things that you as a marketer can do to actually make your product better. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Yeah, but Matt Walleart, everybody. Yes. Well, that concludes the last breakout of the day, but the day is not over. You guys can start heading out to the back. We have the after party set up. There's going to be all the vendors and sponsors and everyone's still here, so make sure you get a chance.